It's not that obviously the ideas that came from Plato's Academy had no pragmatic or practical interest. They had enormous pragmatic and practical interest. But I'm just saying that the initial the space for just having pure thought is important, because if you the space where people are allowed to think just for thinking's sake does lead to practical, pragmatic consequences.
We have all the time in the world, time enough for life to unfold all the precious things love has in store. We have all the love in the world. If that's all we have, you will find we need nothing more. Every step of the way will find us with the cares of the world far behind us. We have all the time in the world just for love, nothing more, nothing less, only love.
And I think maybe the job for thought today is to exist in that space, maybe where that space before Parmenides came up with the one, that space before thought has formed a perfect sphere.
So you have this this concept of the self, of what the self wants. You have like all the others, and what the situation and the problems and the goals and organizations and society and whatever. How does it exist? So like you kind of become aware of something like this sound, like this kind of humming, processors, like doing that, right? It's like our mind, like we are kind of like what is France if not the outcome of some kind of like ongoing, distributed, repetitive operation of minds, that kind of sustain this object. The education is that the world is composed of this and this and this and this, and you perform this and this and this operation on it, without like telling you that you are being asked to perform this operation continuously for the whole system to hold true and to be exactly the way you've been taught it is. Humming sound in the background of everything, like we are doing that, and we are kind of building and sustaining all that landscape in which we think that now we think, like we are just, like, oh, we have found ourselves and like let's think now,
And I want to de-romanticize the word thinking and learning, just to take it into the research. When we think about thinking in terms of the working of the brain, we're saying that every time that a neuron through the synapses is processing any information, it does thinking. This is thinking, the processing of information. So now, when we sit here, we think a lot. We have a lot of thinking, a lot of processing information. We have thinking which involves our senses, because we process our visual information. We process auditory information. We process sometimes the scent of our environment. We process how we see it. And every creature, every animal does thinking. So all the animals are thinking, but now we can discuss the level, the depth of thinking, the complexity of thinking, the abstract of thinking. How much abstract is it? How much invention do we have? How complex is the thinking But we can discuss about the complexity, not the fact that an animal or a creature is thinking. Again, we can even go to the amoeba or even germs and say that they are thinking because they are processing information via routes that we don't know, that we don't understand because we don't have a nervous system. But we are saying that everything thinks. In this sense, it also connects to the open-ended intelligence as well. Sometimes to learn, we need to trim synapses. We need to break through of synapses. Today, when we talk about when you read about memory, people used to say, let's talk about memory, let's talk about working memory. But today, the brain researchers are talking about memory functions, and part of the memory function is also forgetting. Forgetting is not built in our brain. There is a mechanism of reflecting the other all the time, and so the other influences me, and I can sense him or her, or I can simulate him or her. And we go back to, as I said in the beginning, that relation is very, very important into thinking, because even if you go to be a monk, you are not alone. Because when you go to be monk, you go with all your history, your father, your mother, your monk mates that you met. So you are never alone. Really, you cannot be alone in this universe.
That was a good one.
So your body does exist. And I have wonderful, yeah, that's a good news. But it's also bad news.
I was getting scared for a moment.
Yeah, no, because there is this, there are a lot of ideas or concepts that have been also brought into the Western philosophical system, and then there are some misconceptions about it. This idea of emptiness, they are always referring to. Buddhism is always referring to emptiness in appearances. Yes, but and this is the example I like to give, and I like to fight that over also because we have got these dialectical dialogues with students, with each other. Is if you really think this wall is emptiness, I mean here now, not when this next distinction comes, then just run on it. If you run through, I don't take, and this is also what I loved about Buddhism. At the beginning, you are taught that you take nothing for truth, that you take nothing for granted. You question, you ask, until you have a direct experience that tells you, I can accept it. If you cannot accept it, ask again, dig deeper, and never ever believe anything anybody says just because. Right? So the pace to stay with a thought for a longer time. Many people are like, they're jumping. You have a conversation with them, and the conversation changes completely different topic, and if you're not concentrated, you might be lost in the other topic, and then you add another topic, and if a third person is on the table, 4 topics in no time, and then somebody says, well, where have we started again? Right? You might have this experience.
The way we are taught about abstraction has a lot to do with me, myself, and my thought. Now I sit down, I abstract, I understand, I create lucidity, I disentangle, but actually it makes a lot of sense that we begin to abstract in order to communicate. Because communication is really difficult. I would like you to concentrate for a moment on the flabbergasting diversity that sits in this room in terms of difference. We all come from different backgrounds. We all hold different memories, beliefs, theories, you name it. We have different experiences. We have different experiences of our being here right now, and so on and so forth. But somehow we communicate, which is really not trivial, which means we manage to pass some sort of packets of meanings back and forth, which are good enough for us to coordinate and cooperate, because this is what we are trying to do. And it makes sense that abstraction is a big part of it. To package our thought in a way that they can move from within a very rooted experience to somewhere that it's not necessarily rooted in the same kind of experience. It makes sense that this meaning that we create together by abstraction allows us to make prioritization, to coordinate, cooperate, and make decisions. Because one of the really, really difficult aspects of being alive in a world which is endlessly complex, whether we like it or not, and mostly we don't, it's how to bring it down to decision, action, what we do now. I believe that we have certain kind of categories. These categories we are historically inheriting. So there is one thing which is called thought, and there is one thing which is called doing or acting. And there is one thing which is called emoting or feeling, and there is one thing which is called blanking out. And they are separate. But really? I am not sure at all that there is this kind of linear order between I think something and I do something, because there are things that I can think as much as I want and I don't do them eventually because I forget the computer, because I forget the, you name it, okay? And there are things that I think mostly in the making or after the making. So I believe that actually the way I tell this story, it's a bit different. I believe that we have an immensely successful strategy as a species, look at us, which is actually, while finding ourselves in a really, really complex world, what we do, we modify it, we redesign it, we adjust it to our need. And this is how we know. We know by doing and changing.
So, what we would like to do with you this morning is to see how things come to your mind. So we will show you 3 pictures. For one picture you have 3 minutes to, 1 minute to write what comes to your mind. And then you have to write it in very few words. Then we have the second picture, third picture, and then we will have 15 minutes to share what comes to your mind with each of the pictures you saw. Okay?
Okay. So, but then we found out that your card was the same as the same
But we managed to agree that we are.
yeah, we managed to agree to take
That wasn't
and then we were looking at like this for a while, but so in the end, the decision was reached because one of the participants wasn't moving at all. So he said something in the beginning and then it didn't. So that's the narrative that I designed around it to be able to explain it to you. He didn't move. So we had all sorts of wild ideas about it, and then it just gravitated to this idea that was originally already there. That was the way our process went. We had virtually no emotions.
I think it would be really interesting looking at the difference between individual thought, like for your individual patterns, and how group collective thought occurs, and if it dramatically changes how an individual.
No further. Yeah, well, we did some, funny stuff but there was not the need because it's water. It's beautiful water, water. And no, this was the process reflection. I think I have included now also with some funny stories. But for the whole process, there is another funny story I need to share with you, and that was that we agreed that as well-trained trainers, we follow any training design you impose on us very quietly until the end, and then we ask, what the hell do you really want from us?
Thank you. That's
Okay.
okay. So let's assume that this line is something what is this arousal / anxiety line. Okay, so there is a scale here. So Stefan is sitting close to 1. So there is 1 there.
Low intensity.
But it's not his place. It's not his place. He's just
calmness of mind.
he's just sitting there for a while.
Okay, so
Okay, so we have something like 1 there.
Something like 1.
Yes,
One.
yes.
Okay.
Whatever. No. 0 doesn't exist because you know what.
oh, you're there.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. So it's more, So here we are about 5. Yes,
Like
something
freaking
that.
out.
Yeah. And here, the intense, and it means
Going to
something.
jump in a minute.
Yeah. And everything over there, it means something else for each of you. Probably.
Waiting there for my execution type of stuff. And then the piano, last note, and the note goes softer and softer into silence. And for me, the time with the note was just like going slower and slower and slower. And then I realized that there were like 300, 400, 500 people. I could see the face of everybody. And then I was like, oh, this is me. And it's very difficult. You have to be precise and just pure, angelic voice. You're a little boy, you travel to another continent to sing sacred stuff. So I had to do it, and I did it. But the process. I was just like inside myself, I was shaking like a rope in the wind. There was and basically the process that I said, okay, I'm here. There is no turnaround whatsoever. So just like lose yourself into it.
It's limited. It creates this. It limits our resources, and then we all more extensively use these basic heuristics. They're like, well, let's do kind of, it's just more automatic. I'm doing what I know. It was very interesting statement here. That's okay. I used to do that. For example, if I'm preparing a, the kind of, let's say, lecture, whatever, and if I have something like, more relaxed time, if I have time, if I think, wow, how I want to do it, what I want to say to these people, I create a space for me. But if I'm in stress, if I'm not well, if there is something, I'm just using, and reusing the old slides. I put it, oh my goodness, does it make any sense? I don't know if you do that, probably not, but it sometimes happens to me, that I'm not, the quality of it is not as good, and it's also, I can't invest so many mental resources to this particular task.
Does that scale beyond the individual to a collective group of people?
Oh yeah.
Like
Oh, yes.
you were
What
just
a,
saying in
what a
organizational-
lovely question. Oh my goodness, what a lovely question. Yes,
It does.
yes. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because that's very interesting what happened with this anxiety on the group level. And then we people really lose our rationality to the extent.
To me, like if I was reflecting on like something I ran away from at like other conferences and like what we're doing here that's different is like I was associated with the big history community for a while, and there's just no community level reflection at most academic conferences. So like for example, big history presents itself to the world as if it's a universal story of everything and everything's included, but if you just observe the community, the scientific materialists don't like the Buddhist spiritualists, don't like the religious Christians, don't like there's all this internal community tension. So the universal discourse doesn't reflect the subjectivity and the community becoming. And there are some factions within the community that have more power than other factions within the community. There are people who feel marginalized and so forth. And to me, the school of thinking should be able to present a space and create a space where each subjectivity sees itself reflected in the becoming of the community discourse. So, you bring your uniqueness, I bring my uniqueness, everyone brings their and that's sort of reflected in what the community practice becomes in some sense. The question I would feel is like, how much difference is too much difference? Like, what difference can't we process, basically? And I think that goes back to the point I was trying to make about art being this inherent object that can hold difference. But if it was a political imagery, you know, what do people basically, you know, where do we run into a brick wall basically? You know, where do we run into I have to put up a wall to keep the Mexicans out, you know, like, you know, like basically.
For me, one of the very nice thing about this week is this discussion right now. And you don't see that in any other school. And this is, like you say, where we can process our differences, our diversity. And this feedback process, I think, is very deep because we attune ourselves. When you feel the quality of the listening of everybody is in full attention. So it's very precious to me.
I understood it that you make the difference between thoughts and thinking. The one as a process and the other as a form that is coming out of it. And I would understand a school of thinking that we reflect on the process before it goes into the form. And how I understand the presentations, I liked it very much, and I thank all of you who contributed. Really, it was very interesting, but it was all again content, and I wouldn't really criticize it because it was, you have to start somewhere, and I think you did great, all of you who presented and all of you who
to expand into the program, kind of the training on communication training, but communication that would be, you know, conductive or conducive to thinking while, you know, communicating. Kind of like in meeting another person, like there are two concepts being consolidated. And one is of yourself, and the other concept is of the other. And when I speak to you, I have an image of what you are built on what you've said about yourself. So let's say we like just, you know, like meet occasionally, you know, during, I don't know, a period of 5 years, and we communicate. This is, you know, how my perception of you has been shaped, you know, like by all those meetings and what you said. I build this reference, like I have it, right? So and then so like, you know, like I really like to, like I really enjoy, you know, like speaking to people who don't like insist on coherence of myself, and I'm super sensitive to it. I kind of remember what I said about myself, and sometimes I know, okay, there will be like a question coming up, like how is it possible you said something different? And when that person, you know, like doesn't ask this question, I super enjoy it.
Is on the ambiguity in a person, which may have a result on the richness of the objects and models through the generative process. But they leverages the ambiguity in a person. I like that because I never heard that before in communication processes. But of course it has some resonance with, again, from this point of view, because the idea is that we have this picture of ourselves as being congruent in the past, in the present and in the future, but it might be that, and at least I have this experience, the Stefan of the past is not the same Stefan as today. I never had the experience that the Stefan of the morning is not the Stefan of the evening, but it could happen. Right? We're going there.
We share the word together. We speak about this word, but we have completely different concepts and language and categories and how they interrelate and those different models of this reality. You know? So of course, when you listen to somebody speaking, they were like giving you their theory. You have like it does, you know, call out your own conceptualization, right? It does, you know, kind of translate to your language. They say A, and for you it means tree. They say, you know, flower. For you it means, you know, chicken. You know, and so on. And it's not one to one. It's just, you know, like it's a different map. And what we were speaking previously about, those scientific discussions is just, bumping one paradigm on another. Like we have different conceptualizations, we have different names for things, and instead like of going to the next step immediately, like what can we like do together, like so much energy is wasted on like whose name will be on the top, whose category will be used by everybody, So what I like to learn, like what I like to try is kind of listen to the person like concepts and just go on with the communication and say what I would like to say using their language.
Because in my understanding, this thinking starts in interaction, when there is another mind with us to help us understand what's going on. And then the thinking process appears and starts in this interaction. And that I really like this concept, and I think it's very close to what we were talking about already yesterday. For example, everybody who had to do with a small, very, very small baby knows that when it cries, it's really, really tough. When it really cries, to the extent that, this crying, which is, it's not that it does nothing to us. It's really, it calls us. You need to do something with that. Of course, you can be, this parent who wants this baby to deal with that and let it, let it be in the grow up, be in the room, until it's managed to, but in more reasonable way, probably mother or father, whoever cares about it, is going to do something. So one thing is that it could be the first case is that it could be something like that, well, I don't know what's going on with this baby. If it's my first baby and it cries, really, really, I don't know. I'm hugging it and walking, and I try to do something with it, but I don't really know what's going on. So I'm not intensively, I'm not trying to understand, I'm rather trying to do something, and then I don't know what, and then I put it to my partner, and I put it, somewhere, because I don't know what's going on. So it's called blocking emotions. So it means that I'm somehow not letting it to be understood. I don't take it in. So what is important here, that it's probably the reason why baby cry is because it's too much for you. You can't understand what's going on, why it's so uncomfortable here, And probably if mother is able to take it on, she, oh, maybe it's that. And even this act of being with baby makes it quite enough to do something. If it doesn't, if it's something else, then mother needs to continue to really understand what's going on. So blocking, not understanding, just these behavioral tricks like, let's put it to the how we call it this chair. Yeah, no, not yet. Not yet. That's interesting fantasy.
Another reason why I start with Plato is on purpose, because all 20th century philosophers basically made a killing trying to deconstruct Plato. Like, no one liked Plato in the 20th century. Like, you go through every philosopher in the 20th century, they all were like a rebellion against Plato. And I think that there's something deep in that, because Plato is like characterized straw man, like characterization as like the fixed ideal absolute that never changes, and it's like the pure ideality and stuff like this. But again, I think that there's some, like when I see the contemporary philosophical landscape, there's some unresolved coincidence between like pure mathematics and pure emotional thinking. Like pure mathematics and pure emotional thinking, there's some coincidence here between the two that we can't think yet, and I think like it's precisely this desire for oneness. Like I totally have no idea what the status of this desire for oneness is, but I've done personal experiments with this, like it's there. Like people want oneness, like it's not deconstructible. And this is against, so for example, like the main philosopher of postmodernism to me is Gilles Deleuze. And here's his principle. against Plato. Like, he's absolutely against Plato. This is principle of this is direct quote from A Thousand Plateaus. Quote, principle of multiplicity. It is only when the multiple is effectively treated as substantive, multiplicity, that it ceases to have any relation to the one. So you see here, Deleuze is not trying to articulate some one that is absent or something like that, some one that's not there. There's not even a one at all. Like, it's just a pure multiplicity, right? And basically this, like, rhizomatic thinking, I think, lays the metaphorical groundwork for, like, what we today think is network thinking. Like, basically, this is the multiplicity view, the network thinking. So, the first thing with dialectics is that, for me, dialectics are simply a conversation mediated by reason and aimed at truth, but, like, not some truth in the sense of, like, something that like, some substance that doesn't change over time. But really, like, the conversation mediated by reason is, in some sense, trying to get at some truthful coordinates of our becoming. Like, basically, every direction is not okay. Like, it's not that it's just a pure multiplicity. Anything is okay. Like, and the problem is, like, where are the limits here? Like, because the problem of where are the limits here is precisely, to me, a religious question, because, like, in the traditional world, like, you knew what the limits were. It has a transcendental limit. Like, and the book is from on high and stuff like that, and you can't question the limits. But when you remove this transcendental limitation, then the question of, like, why would I listen to some other human limiting me? Like it's just another human just like me, so why does he get to, or he or she get to limit me in some absolute way? Like, but at the same time, when you just fall into, like, a spiraling multiplicity of no direction and stuff like that, I think nihilism sinks in pretty quickly. So it still you know, operates. But these dualities are obviously everywhere. Like, they're intuitive, and we just think about them in this way. Like, so for example, there's so many of them. Like, they're endless. So, like, light, dark, order, chaos, masculine, feminine, life, death, peace, war, health, sickness, temporality, eternity, movement, stillness. Like, movement, stillness is an interesting one. Something, nothing, and so forth. So this is where the dialectic finds its home, is in this play between the opposites, this contradiction inherent to our being in some sense. So obviously, then the triadic logic that they come up with to deal with this is a thesis. Like, well, it's taken many different forms. Like, the thesis, antithesis, synthesis is one particular form that you can approach it with. It has other names, but, like, that's the one I often find most useful. So, for example, like, I think the important point in, like, even in, like, we'll get more into it, but the important point is regard the third term, the synthesis, which is that the third term is totally an open term. Like, it's not the synthesis is not a closure. It's not that you reconcile the opposites in eternity. Like, it's that the opposites become reconciled in some interesting way, and then you get a new oppositional determination. You open yourself up onto a new field. So, like, for example, like, this is, like, for example, like, what communism can't think, like, communist theory. Like, if you actually talk to communists, like, about, like, what does world communism look like? They have no idea. Like, all they can do is critique capital. Like, and they do it well, but then, like, yeah, but what is communism? Like, then they just fall flat. So, like, but it's just, like, to me, the problem, like, so you have, say, the proletariat, the bourgeoisie, like, the thesis and the antithesis. Then you have to come up with a synthesis, world communism, and you get rid of those two categories. But then, what is the oppositional determination of the other system? Like, is it, I have my own ideas, but, like, just what is that new oppositional, because it's not, the ideology is that you reconcile the opposites and then you have utopia. And this is ideology. It's not going to be utopia. It might even be worse. Like, it might even be more traumatic. Like if we're all living together, for Christ's sake. Like,
I need my coffee break.
Right, yeah, like, already I'm probably too much, right? Or, like, even, like, my favorite one with God is, so thesis, there is a God, one. Antithesis, there is no God, no one. There's no one there. Synthesis, there is a not one. So, there is a not one is that, of course, there's no other there that's going to hold me and take me in, but at the same time I want, you know, like, it still affects, like, even if there's no God, the Crusades still happened, you know, like people still fucking, you know, it's like a paradoxical absence that still has efficacy and so forth. Like,
those who may not be familiar with systems and general systems theory is, we have heard these days about grand unifying theory. I think that was coming from you, right?
me?
Yeah.
Adele?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
And there is this, there was
I
this-
already dissolved that identity yesterday. I'm no longer that identity.
Good for you.
Oh,
That was I was interested in that yesterday. Now I'm no longer interested in that.
And now the world is processing.
Yeah.
I understand.
I'm totally
So,
now I'm
so the Cadell from yesterday
Right.
said,
That
said
idiot.
something about
Asterisk.
He's gone now.
I like it very much. Indeed he is. But there was this. But no, maybe we are thinking here together about is this a valuable part of a future program because it would then take, if the question could be answered with yes, then it would take another thinking process together. What should we actually bring into? As you can imagine, with my opening, I said 755 pages. This is what we nowadays would consider as the knowledge base of all the different approaches towards systems.
What I notice is that if you talk about complex problems of today, you know, the big challenges, responsible research, for most people, to see outside their silo is such a revelation. So I'm not worried, you know, in your loops, I found that helpful. I mean, if only they start understanding that systems are something different, they don't need to get into technicality or 12 principles, I don't care. But it empowers them to start thinking outside their box. And that for me is very
A session about the approach of science. And the most deeply developed methodology and mostly used until the last part of the 20th century, it's what is called the reductionist approach, which brought us very far. The very basics of it is the fact that any phenomena can be reduced either to its basic components or to some more fundamental laws and principles. The most impressive example of it is the laws of Newton. The man really had a stride. So he managed to reduce all and every movement in the universe to 3 basic laws. It's incredible. Which means when you have something which is really wide, you can separate, you can isolate the territories of knowledge which are needed, and this is also at the basis of disciplines. So you have particular disciplines for different territories of knowledge, and they can be separated and isolated without issues. Now, of course, the world is full of all kinds of phenomena that do not exactly yield to the reductionist approach. Until a certain point, these phenomena were mostly dismissed. But in the last half of the 20th century, they are kind of exploding, and they are mostly part of the world that we create, because we are increasing connectivity and agglomeration. So even in the human world, the level of complexity is rising. But complexity exists at every scale. So there is no clear understanding through reductionism of development of multicellular organisms. There is no, it cannot be explained the whole aspect of social behavior, for example, in insects, beehives and ants, cities, social networks. They are all phenomena that do not yield to the reductionist approach. So in which another interesting example of emergence is, for example, if you take termites alone, they are normally sexual which means they pair in couples, they reproduce, they are normal insects one-on-one. But when you put the same insect within a colony, then you get what we all know, which is the social caste of termites. The social caste of termites, which are also creating very serious modifications in the body, they are not genetic. They are actually an outcome of sociality. You like it? I think that from the standpoint of what we are doing this week, probably the more interesting conclusion of all of this rushed journey, it's a new perception of agency. What I mean by that is that we can look at actors themselves as if existing on a network. And this gives us a big advantage. I don't agree that the network doesn't serve us. It does serve us. Because if you perceive yourself as existing on a network is something that it's very easy to modify. Because you are going to connect another philosopher, or you are going to connect another significant others, you are going to connect a different organization, a different place of knowledge, a particular passion, you name it. And the moment you do this, you are transforming yourself, the world around you. So in this sense, the networks, it's, in a way, it makes it a bit more possible to think of how actors are world-making entities.
So that as another way of looking at our different worlds in their multiple dimensions, whether it's our inner world or the outer world and the intersubjective world, and the different dimensions of reality, complexity. A very important point for me is that it can be a tool for inquiry and probing experience of reality and confronting views. So maybe trying to touch the truth by confronting the reality that comes from different experiences, and then a tool to construct new realities. So it was about having an enhanced embodied cognition, probing, sensing, thinking, acting, acuteness or capacity, that when we're in the confusion and noise, we can develop like new senses, acute senses to try and penetrate the blur or the...
It's kind of...
No, I'm saying that if we think more, if we bring to the surface more of the way our brain works and things are assembled in our minds, then maybe we can manage to inquire and decode more of what's going on inside ourselves, outside ourselves, and across us.
Could the relate? Because I'm also asking, like, what is the relation with the systems thinking summer school aim or purpose or whatever it is? That instead of saying we're seeking the truth, is we're working on patterns that we bring about, And then you see, I see this pattern, maybe you see a different pattern, and I'll call you insane, or I'll call you false, or I'll call you stupid. Whereas when you see it as, oh, she has a different pattern, it totally changes the rules of the game.
Do you remember when we first met, we talked about this. How do we do this? Yeah, we always make decisions, one after the other. It's getting quite complex in the end. Yeah, but fundamentally, this is what we do. And it's the same in quantum physics. When we go to the foundation of quantum physics, then we have distinction, not continuity. Continuity is happening later. That's the interesting thing there. Yeah. So, okay. What would I do when I am in the supermarket and I see the green apple,
and the red apple, and I want to choose one of them. I would make a decision. I would mark this, with my eyes, my internal senses. This is yummy. With my tongue, with my nose, everything is involved. We call this content, and this context. A red apple, another red apple, and another red apple. So, this is, when we mark this, we have a set of things. We decided to observe a set of things. Yes, I can observe U-Cyphon as a set and as a unit. Okay. Yeah, I can decide to say this is Cyphon, and I can say this is the brilliant scientist who told me about termites and things like that yesterday, and she is lovely and tall and natural, etc. And yeah, can you see something?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, you see re-entry, and it's transforming. Yeah, all the time. Just enjoy it a little bit. That's what's happening in your mind when you are thinking. In a very simple way now, but I find this pretty. It's soothing. And now see the re-entry. That's one reason why I'm not so into concept ontology. Wörter, terms. Yeah. I like to have a little bit more variety in order to do this. Let's think about what we want to observe. What do we want this concept? Yeah. How do we want this to function? What do we want to do with it? Yeah. That's more what I'm interested in. We all can fight about concepts until the world's ending and coming nowhere. But when we choose to become a little bit more free, to a little bit more distance, we can create new languages, new spaces for communication.
Really nice introduction to because the question, what is creative? That's the question. And the simplest answer I know is to say that it's something new first. And then the other part is that it's also adequate. Yeah? So it's not just new. It's also somehow fits to what we are looking for in a way. Yeah? So that's the second part. And that's another important quality of this process for me is what happens in mind when we are looking for something what is new, or if we really want to find something like that. And what I really like about creativity is that it's, as it's called in psychology of creativity, that it's self-rewarding process. So it could be, thinking could be a process like that, maybe sometimes. But often we think that, when we are willing to rethink something, and we somehow need to maybe something. But if we create something, it's more connected with, okay, let's play, let's have a little bit lighter atmosphere. And so this kind of what we may enjoy. So it's about enjoying thinking, having a real joy.
Yeah, you can agree with it or not, but that's how I feel about it when I say something is new. I, in my personal opinion, have never thought or experienced this particular whatever before. And this can go for groups. And it grows more complicated, for example, when someone develops a new theory and the whole nation is, wow, hey, super, it's completely new, and then someone comes from Azerbaijan and says, no, I've created something like this 20 years ago, so here it is. And then we see, okay, this person, this is not new and hasn't been, when we develop this theory.
These are the basics we have learned actually at the beginning of the week. Is about what is a thought, how do thoughts arise, what is a thought process, what influences a thought process, from social dynamics to emotions to. And then, if I may, there is a point number 4, but this is only Stefan now. I had the thought when I was reflecting on that, which was, by the way, on the Place of the Louvre. I was sitting there on the weekend and I was reflecting on what I've experienced so far. The excellent thinker has the ability to communicate his or her knowledge, to co-create further insights with the ability of, and now comes something, non-identification of him herself with the concepts and thus thought process. Again, the excellent thinker, so here we are, this is a good thinker. The excellent thinker has the ability to communicate, so I do it in my list there. If I have the ability to communicate my knowledge,
clarity,
yeah, to co-create, so that means together with others, further insights, with an ability of non-identifying myself with the concepts I came up with, and thus my own thought process. This comes from my life experience, not from a theoretical reflection, but because I'm working with so many thinkers. Those who have the ability to not make an identity out of their thought processes, they can really engage in a co-creation of knowledge.
Earlier, but I decided to have in the 3 groups 3 different. Okay. So you had nothing to start. They had keywords, a lot of keywords related to distributed thinking, and they had a very short introduction, very general introduction about what is distributed thinking.
Very precise on theory.
And this idea of competition, you know, was the organizing idea of the group work.
and I think that there was actually even in this very brief time, the moment that we started to think about it, it was nice to see how the bits of a bit of fertility and bit of conflict and bit of fertility and bit of conflict. We have an
second group, we started.
We were professional from the start to the end.
Yeah, but the global view is meant to emerge in a certain way from the process. Well, you have 11 principles, right?
We discussed what the outcome. 11 principles is the produced.
Well,
It's
when
a
I say
produced,
the
it's not a
global
global
view is the produce of the individual, yeah, global view is probably not the word to use.
No, I mean there is no definition at the end. There is only sentences from different people.
Yeah, and that's
they may be
when I say
redundant.
global view, it's
maybe that's the
processing
question.
of what has been. So you want.
That's the question after all, maybe. Once the thinking is distributed, how can we contain it again?
Yeah.
How can we make an actual thinking out of it?
Yeah, or
and
an
not
actual
like pop.
coherent.
Without
The
talking?
I mean, this is we need
And
to
the equator is in the middle. Like this is the equator.
let's just decide
I'm
north.
You got a bunch of scientists there.
So I guess
I'm curious.
here.
Basically, I had a math and computer science education. So I was very much in the hard science demonstration and computer machines and algorithm. And I did a PhD in control system. Control system control.
Control. Oh.
Yeah. So it's and in the meanwhile I was dancing a lot. So dance took more and more space in my life. I began to teach, especially I was dancing contact improvisation. It's mainly about sensing gravity and sharing weight. And the principle is to experiment together how is it to fall, and well, sometimes to fall on each other, sometimes to fall on the floor.
Shove you out of the way.
Anyone else wants to try this?
There is a real question to the degree to which natural scientists will be interested in what we're doing. There are some natural scientists who will be interested in what we're doing, and there are some natural scientists who just are not going to be interested in what we're doing, and that's precisely because of the status of the subject. So usually when people come together about thinking, it's just talk. Right? He said it's just talk, and I like more the experiment and the theory and stuff like this. But it's precisely this status of the talking which psychoanalysis takes seriously. So it's just an important theoretical point, which is that the just talking is important, and there are natural scientists who are not going to be interested in that. It's going to be useless to them, and we might lose them, but it's just the way it is. So the concept of ikigai is basically a concept that means infusing meaning in being and stabilizing meaningful action across the whole of a life. And the interesting thing about the symbol of ikigai is the way in which the geometry of all of these dimensions are interconnected. So it's structured in such a way as if you remove one ring, the rest of the rings fall apart. Like it requires basically balancing multiple dimensions simultaneously. And so the first, so I'm going to refer to the ring we take away. So here the ring we take away is what you can be paid for. So you're good at it, you love it, the world needs it, but you can't get paid for it. And then the formula for ikigai is it's delightful and full, but there's no wealth. And so for me, this has been this is the most problematic dimension for me personally, because I absolutely live my life for what I love to do. I remember from my first job I was working in a fish and chip kitchen, whatever. My mom would drive me there, I would cry before going in. I was like, I don't want to do this. I was like, I must do what I love to do. Like, I cannot live without that. So that was always first, and then...
I can start.
No, you cannot always start. It's not
He wants.
healthy for the
He
group.
needs to.
No, I don't.
He needs my opinion. It will be, in my opinion, it will be an excellent idea to invite a transhumanist thinker to the summer school of thinking next year.
So I think it would, there's at the same time an impatience. You know, I want this thing to, I need the money and I want it to get going. But at the same time, like an openness, well, who knows if this group is going to take it or not. So I think it would be helpful if there would be a kind of a time frame, where would we like to be, well, you said 5 years from now, or maybe 3 years from now, and then where would that put her, or where would that put his ideas, or what could happen to what,
So,
to sort of
our conversation focused a lot on environments, that it's not just about the material that you present, but actually the environment in which you present it and how people interact with each other. And that some of the best learning that you can have is the community that you develop, but you need to feel that you're in a comfortable, good space. The problem is...
Yeah, let's read the thing first. Each participant spent a full day dedicated to observe a place where they had never been, and build a presentation to other participants that interlaces his identity and his experience observation.
The goal is to
And
like
this
before every summer before every program we run, to try to come with a lot of internal reflection and clarity about what we want to say and how we want to say it, and maybe why we want to say it. What do we want to get and take away from things.
My suggestion was to kind of create an understanding of how, as a group, when we come together, we interconnect on multiple different levels. As persons, our areas of discovery and goals. So, you may believe me or not, but it's not.
We don't believe.
It's
I
not
do
about
believe.
my experience. It's about Rolf's experience. It was his second choice. He will be talking about his first choice. So his second choice was that would be useful within this group school of thinking to experience a little bit more of group dynamics, consciously experience, to see how literally group dynamics influence the way we think and the results of this thinking. And
I would recommend, like when we start the next summer school, to do a very challenging kick-off where you experience yourself in a situation where you feel like, ooh, I'm showing too much of myself.
You know. And so the idea might be to create a practical challenge that is so complex and but also delimited in time and scope, but that we have to fry our brain.
What? Love it.
That we have to fry our brain.
Fry?
Yes.
Fry. Like, okay.
And that not one person can have the answer. So that we all have to put the collective intelligence all together to provide an answer, and also that just goes beyond the pure intellectual thinking, that we involved all aspects of our being.
that was a joke. But what we had as samples from each person, it was some sort of an introduction, some sort of basics, laying on the ground. Obviously, that was what had to be there. But how the mind gets sparkled and inspired and curious and thinking creatively is when you don't hear basics, when you hear the frontiers of what is, most inspiring and most challenging for the speaker at the moment. Where do they go with their things? And then
so personal feedback from me is that the humor I have experienced during this week should be always kept up, because it helped us so much in all our different difficulties. So I have experienced so many groups over so many years in so many countries, and the quality of this group has been expressed for me in the humor we have developed together. So this also, maybe you can't design it into a program, maybe by choosing the right personalities, I don't know, but this is also...
A minute of humor.
Okay.
No.
Okay, because I have a question, Marta.
Yes, please.
What the fuck are we doing here?
Thank you for this question. What we were doing here, as you may have noticed by now, was formation of something that when we came here it wasn't there, and when we leave it hopefully does exist. So to experience it a little bit more, I would like to ask you to, you remember we were speaking about those self-identity, referential, constructed, whatever you want to call it, that in thinking it's sometimes useful to be able to differentiate yourself from or transcend or whatever the activity. So it's the individual self. So what I would like to ask you to do now is just forget about those. Kind of do the motion you need, either like go beyond or burn it or explode it or just hang it somewhere on the wall. It's not so useful anymore if you just get rid of those. For a moment, we'll go back to that. And what we are becoming now is it's a little bit more complicated creature, which is some kind of emerging entity, which even does have a name already. It's that school, Montparnasse initiative. Can you feel it? Changing the body shape and the body thinking in that shape is somehow different. I don't know. Does it have veins? Does it have bones? Does it have skin or hair? How you feel it and how you experience it? It's emerging it. So, what sound does it make as an organism? Can you hear it? This is very interesting. My answer is that what the school is like, who the school is for the human being. Starting with, and we can start with drawing an ideal target group with some demographical description and characteristics and presumed needs and so on. But if we draw such a picture, for me, it's not a human being. It's a social construct, which is already a highly compressed description of what society has produced as a coherent group because of its internal composition. So you have professions, you have paradigms, you have but market needs, whatever you line of conceptualization you take, you will come up with this image of somebody, and you will derive the idea of the needs of that somebody, collective somebody, from that description. And for me, if you take society, every part, every small social system responds to those descriptions in other social systems. It's interrelating. This group, this entity is responding to those entities producing those and those characteristics and those needs and deficiencies. It's a game between social entities and their self-description. And for me, if we are about to produce the next such thing, let's go home. Let's just go home. It doesn't make. It's so many of them, and they're so stupid that I don't want to participate in anything like that. If we are not able to enrich the human being, happening to be involved in whatever activity there is, in a way that in the end that human being will be stronger in its own thinking, while being engaged in whatever the person is engaged in. Then that's not a school of thinking. It's just a school of processing information in a compressed and self-organized and collective, stupid way. If that's thinking, it's a thinking of the non-predefined human being, and we do have access, and we can easily look into the needs of that being because we happen to be one of them. So whatever resonates in you in what we are trying to do, whatever inspires you in what we are doing, whatever excites you and gives you hope in it, this is what we want to enhance, and this is for me the difference we want to build upon.